4 little words break my heart every time I hear them. I'm just not artistic. Says who? Anyone can make amazing art that they're proud of. Calligraphy's an amazing way to relax, unwind, and cut through the noise of our always-on, hyper-connected lives. Today, I'm going to distill the core essential skills to 4 basic things, so by the end of this video, you'll have everything you need to learn how to do blackletter calligraphy. Starting with a few basic tools. The simplest kit to get started is to strap a couple of pencils together and use any paper you have handy. This totally works, and it's actually one of my favorite ways to experiment these days, but there are a couple of challenges, especially when you're just a beginner. First, even though it looks pretty small, the gap between the tips of the 2 pencils is actually pretty wide. This makes writing a little bit harder because you have to use a lot more arm movement than if you use a smaller pen. Second, even though any paper you have on hand, usually printer paper, may work great with pencils, it really doesn't hold up well to most of the awesome art tools we love to use. Even with just ink, you'll run into problems like feathering and bleeding, which will make your work look a lot worse regardless of how much skill you have. To level up to a better calligraphy kit, my favorite pen is the Pilot Parallel pen. If you're just getting started, I recommend using the 2.4 or 3mm sizes. Go with the 2.4 for the easiest writing experience that still writes some pretty wide lines, or if you're up for a little bit more of a challenge, go with the 3mm version. For learning, my favorite paper at the moment is Canson XL marker paper. You get 100 sheets in a pad, it works great with any ink that I've used with it, and it's thin enough to be kind of like tracing paper so you can see a guide sheet underneath. Don't worry, we'll get to guide sheets in a sec. One pro tip with the parallel pens, you can clean out the cartridges when you're done with them and then refill them with any ink you like. Now that we know the basic tools that we need, let's do a little bit of setup before we start writing. You could absolutely try to just freehand writing letters on a blank page, but that's one of the hardest calligraphy skills to pull off. So I highly recommend that you start by using guides. Just like lined paper or graph paper, guides are just a set of lines that help us write the letters. All you need is a ruler and a pencil, but there are a couple of things that will make your life a lot easier. The first is a parallel line ruler like this, which lets you draw parallel lines just by gliding the ruler up and down. These are absolutely great, but you still have to draw the guidelines every single time with these, just like with the ruler and the pencil. The other alternative is to use a light box. You'll see how one of those works in just a second. For now, let's step through creating the guides, just using a ruler to help explain the concepts. To draw the guides, we start by leaving a space for the X height. So we'll draw a line to form the base of the letters. You can put that anywhere on the page for now. Let's just draw a line like this. And for this 3.8mm pen, I happen to know that you need around 2 centimeters of height between the bottom line and the top line. And I've done this enough times with these rulers, so I know roughly where to leave the next mark. So it's about here. So draw another line. So this here is our X height. And again, that's the distance between this line and this line. This line at the bottom being called the baseline. And at the top here, this one's called the waistline. Now this X height is intended to cover the height of a lot of the letters like A, C, E, and O, but there are some letters like B and like G. For those, we need to leave just a little bit of room above the waistline and below that baseline. So again, I know roughly how much room to leave here, and I'll explain how much space to leave in a second. So that would be room for my ascender area here. Ascender. So these are the letters like B and D and F, where there are parts of the letters that extend above that waistline. And then we need to leave a little bit of space for descenders. Just go like that. And this area down here is the room for the descenders. And those are for letters like G and Y and P. So the next question is, well, exactly how much space do I leave in here for these X heights, ascender areas, and descender areas? The spacing we leave for these areas depends on the specific style of lettering that we're writing. But if you're just getting started, a ratio of 5 here in the middle, 2 at the top, and 2 at the bottom works great. The next question now is 5 to and 2 of what? Basically, these are measurements of how many nib widths. So we're talking here about the distance between the left edge of this nib and the right edge of this nib. So basically the width. Based on the measurement we have for these pens, we know this to be 3.8 millimeters. So for this 3.8 millimeter pen, that would measure out to be 3.8 millimeters times 5. That's equal to 1.9 centimeters if I did my math right, which I just rounded to about 2 centimeters. We don't have to be calligraphy scientists, 2 centimeters just fine. For the A center then, it would be 3.8 times 2, or I could just rough that to about 4 times 2, which is about 8 millimeters. And down here, it's the same 8 millimeters. Again, doing a little bit of rounding. One more easy way to do this if you don't like a whole lot of math is you can actually just measure out the nib width. So you may have seen on a lot of guides, there'll be a little grid, like a little checkerboard grid here. So I can use this to measure out 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there's my 5 at the top. And you see it's a little bit wider just because I rounded up again. And the same thing would be up here. Again, I just eyeballed this one, so this one was about 2 for that area. And then down here, there's a lot closer on this one, so 2 there at the bottom. That's another way you can measure them out if you don't like to do all the math. Of course, there's also one more way to get started with a set of guides that you can use to just jump into writing the letters, and that's by using a set of guide sheets like the ones that I've made available for free at blackletterfreebies.com. I made this set of guides to save you all the time in doing all the measuring on your own. There are guides for 6 different pen sizes, ranging all the way from 1.5 millimeters to this biggest one at 6 millimeters. This way you don't have to do any of the math or any of the measuring on your own. Everything's ready to go with some additional helpful guidelines already baked in. I used a 3:5:3 ratio in this case for the guides just to give a little bit of room above and below that X height, and you can trace right on top of these with a thinner paper like the Canson XL marker paper, or make it even easier and be able to use any paper you want using a light box. We'll see how easy it is to use these next. In the meantime, just remember you can always just draw the guides on your own if you prefer. With our guide set up, the next thing we need is just 4 simple lines to write the entire alphabet. We'll use a vertical line that looks like this, a diagonal line, just like this, a thin diagonal line. It can move upwards, this angle, or can move downwards, and finally, a horizontal line. That's it. That's all we need to write the entire alphabet. Let's walk through an example now using those 4 lines, maybe even less, starting with the letter A. I'm going to start right here, vertical line straight down, that was line number 1, diagonal line, that was line number 2, diagonal line again, that was line number 2, and then vertical line, that was line number 1. I also did a very short skinny line number 3 there, and then line number 2 again. Let's do one more just for fun. If I wanted to try out the letter B, start just a little bit higher, vertical line number 1, coming down, diagonal line number 2, starting up here, diagonal line number 2, vertical line number 1. And that's it. Again, just 2 of the lines used here. What's even more awesome is that we can create a ton of alphabets with just these 4 simple lines. I'll show you what I mean with the letter A. I'm just going to go for around a minute here, and let's see how many different variations we can come up with on just one letter. So we've got our standard one here. I could also make a little tweak, come up with a vertical line, diagonal line. And what if I went horizontal up here? There, horizontal. That was line 4. Now line 1 again, and then line 2. Not bad. That's one variation. What if we wanted a taller A? We could come up even taller, long. This is a very tall A. Now we've got a really tall one. Again, I could go horizontal at the top. That's a much taller and longer A. Same 4 lines. I could start halfway down, come up with a variation here. Line 1, line 2. What if we come horizontally here? Line 4, line 1 again, and then line 2. That's one variation. What if I did this? Vertical line 1, line 2. Now what if I change the angle here at the top? Now it's a bit wider here at the top. Come out to the end like this. Maybe start a little bit lower. There's another line 1, line 2 again. Same 4 lines. Look at all the different variations we're coming up with. I can even start lower again. Line 1, line 2. I could come diagonally this time. What if we started here? Small diagonal, line 3, diagonal, line 2. Now come back down, line 1, and then line 2 again. What if we wanted a wider letter? Line 1, line 2. I'm pulling it out further to the left now. Line 2, further to the left. Now line 1 again, and line 2 again. Now see how this one's a little bit wider than the top one? Let's try one more. What if we did the same starting at the top here, line 1, and then line 2. What if I go with a steeper angle, but I just stop right here? Now another line 1, another line 2. Going back to our first basic one, what if I do line 1, line 2, line 2, line 1, line 2. Now what if I add another little line 2 here in the centers? I could do the same with the straight version. Line 1, line 2, horizontal this time. Now vertical. Line 2. Here's another little line 2, line 2. Hopefully you're seeing now how much fun you can have with just those 4 simple lines. Now there's one more thing you're going to need to learn calligraphy, and it's something that I unfortunately can't give you. Persistence. I'm not saying you have to practice super intensely for hours and hours every single day to get good at this. You can absolutely make fantastic progress by setting aside even 15 or 30 minutes just a few times a week. My biggest tip for keeping up with and creating this consistency is to have fun every time you sit down to write. That'll always keep you excited to come back for more. Just remember this tip: consistent commitment beats infrequent intensity every time. Now, if you're ready to learn the rest of the alphabet, check out this video here where I walk through every letter A through Z. And remember that you can get the free guide sheets at blackletterfreebies.com. If you're still not sure about learning calligraphy though, check out this video where I bust 3 common myths about learning calligraphy. In the meantime, keep writing, keep playing, and have an absolutely fantastic day. I'll see you next time.